Bobby Mukherji from Bobby Mukherji and Associates.
The dharm sankat sometimes I get into, right, is in the name of lighting design, making it look cool, glamorous, blah, blah, blah. Where does the green element or this whole sustainability angle come into all this? A bit of a fix sometimes.
Sarvdeep Basur from Lucent Worldwide.
We did not have the restrictions which normally there would be. कि ये रेजिडेंट की आंख में पड़ेगा, ये होगा, वो होगा, पड़ता नहीं है if it is well designed.
Sarfaraz Momin from StudioPOD.
If we take this idea that the structure starts reading from its open spaces, streets, parks, all of this will tie into this one very simple master plan, which will then help the lighting designer also to emphasize that structure.
Reza, Kabul from ARK Kabul Architect.
In Alamo, there's no lights on the street. It's because they believe that lighting is this pollution, and it's harmful for the birds, the flora and the fauna. They need to sleep, and that's why they do not have street lights.
And Sachi Gupta from Synthesis.
There is a lot of potential, which is like, for example, the enhancement that the cultural heritage, the history that we have. Yes, we are highlighting the monuments. Yes, we are highlighting the roads and the bridges, but not in the apt way.
This is a subject which is very close to my heart, and it's something that has a tremendous potential in our environment, in our country, in our city, and it's something that's been completely ignored by the key decision makers. Here we have a team of panelists here who are very, very successful in doing large-scale projects, who I would like to ask certain questions as to how we can improve our urban development schemes, where, moment we compare ourselves with, when we travel around the world, we see a huge difference in the way our cities are lit up compared to, cities like, say, Miami or Dubai or London. I think we are way behind. So let me start with Mr. Basur. Now, you have tons of experience with doing projects all across the world and in India as well. I can see that certain amount of initial, spark coming into, in terms of lighting design into our projects. Now, when you compare, what's the great stuff that you've done, say perhaps in Shanghai or in Shenzhen and in Sydney, in places like that. Now, when you compare to what's happening in our country, where have we gone wrong?
We've not yet gone wrong because we are just starting. We are still at a stage where probably China was 20 years back. They also started experimenting with temporary lights, like the word which you used, decorating rather than beautifying. That's where we are at the moment, but there's some buildings which we are now seeing lit up, mainly heritage buildings. But we have a long way to go. And there's a huge impact which we can create with lighting, the nighttime look and feel of the building, the pride which, some important buildings can bring to the residents, like the example which we were discussing about the Brideshwara Fort, the Tanjavur, now there were people, like I mentioned, an 80-year-old had never visited the Brideshwara temple before it was illuminated. So he said, the first time I visited the temple, it was 79. And now I feel really proud that I live in a city where we have such a beautiful monument. So that's a kind of pride which will come, but we're just starting.
So I can see that in your project in Gwalior, for example. I'm doing a project there too. We're doing up the Usha Kiran Palace. So through the construction process, I've been on the terraces and looking up how well the city is lit up, and the fort especially. I find it to be dramatically different from many of the other towns. It's not a really large city, but it's very, the scale is perfect, you know, for tourism and stuff. And how is it that you were able to do that kind of a justification to good illumination there compared to managing it in other parts of the country? You know, what was the, what allowed it?
That's a controversial question. Because we had a powerful man, Mr. Scindia was himself involved in the project, so we had less constraints. So there were fewer, you know, I would say, restrictions. We could use the kind of fixtures we wanted to. We could get the good contractors on board. L1 was not a criteria. Then we did not have the restrictions which normally if you there would be कि ये resident की आंख में पड़ेगा, ये होगा, वो होगा, पड़ता नहीं है. If it is well designed, things are managed well. But if you have somebody who understands what he wants and what can be delivered and has the power to get it executed, so you get a result like Gwalior.
So I guess at the end of the day, the clientele plays a very important role.
Yes.
The nature of the
man
client,
on top.
the exposure, the education levels, all that.
Absolutely.
Sarfaraz, now you are an urban planner. You have been working on large-scale urban developments across the country. Now, how do you, as an urban planner, that's probably the client is not expecting the lighting component to come in a big way, and I don't even think that the client has enough knowledge or exposure to this subject. So knowing that it's your project and you know the fact that illumination lighting plays an important role in urban scapes, that you are, say, a replanning or making a new master plan, or so how do you ensure that how are you able to build that into your design scheme?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of. I agree with you completely. I think the landscape is changing. More and more people are getting aware that there is a need for some sort of planning and coordination. A lot of our bureaucrats and politicians are now traveling a lot more. They're going outside and they're coming back with a question. They're coming back and saying that, why can't my city be like that? Tell me what is going on. And that's where our role comes in. We go and we say that, you know, most good cities actually have a lot of things working together in an integrated manner. The open spaces are talking to the streets are talking to the parks and the waterfront or the river, and they're all connected as a system. When the connected system starts making sense, where a lot of layers have to come up, and lighting is one of them. Every city anywhere in the world has a structure. Like for instance, Mumbai is a peninsula, it has coastline on both sides. There is a readable structure in any city. And if we take this idea that the structure starts reading from its open spaces, streets, parks, all of this will tie into this one very simple master plan, which will then help the lighting designer also to emphasize that structure. And this will create unique cities. Essentially, it will not be the same sort of LED lamp that will be used all over the country. And when they see this happening, saying that now this looks unique, now this is nice, I see what you're doing, and that's where our role as educators comes in. As you know, an urban designer, you have to talk about multiple systems. I have to talk about birds, I have to talk about water, I have to talk about infrastructure, and as part of infrastructure, lighting is a big component in that.
So after you are appointed, are you able to influence them to rope in a lighting designer?
I think we have been fairly successful with the private developers to a large extent. With the government, we are now making great inroads. Now, when we're doing streets with government, a lot of streets are owned by governments, and even if they are developed by private developers, they're handed over to governments to maintain for a long period of time. As part of the street component, there is a huge growth that we've seen in the country right now. People are understanding streets a lot more. They're seeing them as open spaces and public spaces. And they now, as part of that, there is big guidelines at the center level as well that have been identified. And one of the component is lighting. The other is a cycle track. The third is a sidewalk. The fourth is planting. Fifth is, there are dustbins. And these things are getting added to our directory slowly and steadily. Not everywhere, but they are getting recognized. So making inroads has become easier in the past 10 years. Now when I come up and say that we need these sort of lights, we need vehicular lights, not just travel lane, but we also need pedestrian lighting. There is very little objection to this anymore. Earlier there was like this, no, don't have the budget for this. And that awareness we see as a big change that is happening, and that really ties into the story. We are in a place where we are growing, and as we evolve, I think more and more acceptance to well-designed spaces will come into place, and more people will ask for this because they've seen and they've traveled, and the clients are getting more and more involved, be it government or private developers. They are asking for, saying that why isn't this looking like what I saw in Singapore? Why isn't it looking, what is different? Why can't I make this like that street? So it's happening. The change is happening slowly and steadily though.
So I think in the next 20 years, our country is going to be much more mature in this.
Absolutely heading in that direction.
Right.
If we guide it in the right way, there'll be a leapfrog that we'll do. Basically, essentially, there is so much that we can leapfrog from all the mistakes that have happened. We are in a position to just learn from the mistakes and see if we can leapfrog these mistakes and just jump onto things like, okay, don't spend on cheap lights or luminaires. Spend on, the post can be cheap, it's okay. The luminaire will be expensive. Let's educate people about that, and people are realizing that, okay, maybe it will benefit me for the government. Decision makers are also realizing this, that the response from people has been phenomenal. So I think probably is the right thing to do, and the change is happening for sure.
Reza, my old friend, we go a long way. Reza lives between San Francisco and Bombay, so he has best of both the worlds. So, when you're driving from your office in Bombay to your home, and when you drive from your Frisco office to to your home or to another site or whatever, what's the evening lighting difference that you see between our environment and a beautiful, sophisticated environment like the whole Bay Area? What would you tell us? I'm sure it's soaked in deep into your system by now.
Thank you. So let me just start with something, what we experience in India. Earlier when we were doing buildings, when the building was completed, the client would say, I want some lighting. And there was a vendor brought in, and he used to come in and just do something. The cheapest would be the floodlights, and it was not considered whether it's hitting the eyes of the residents or what's happening. That was not there. It was just that, okay, I want to make a statement. I've done a building, and it has to be highlighted, and they used to do it. In India now, we've graduated from that, and we've come to lighting designers, where we bring in lighting designers on board right from inception, or maybe towards the end of the project they're coming on. Whereas in the US, like if you just talk about traveling from downtown San Francisco to my place where it is in Alamo, you have to cross the Bay Bridge. And when you're crossing the Bay Bridge, you see the amount of lighting that is there on the Bay Bridge is just the amount that is required. It doesn't hurt your eyes. It's just on the, the driveway. And it's not towards the drivers. It's when you're driving this way, it comes from the backside. So you get the exact amount of light on the street, and it's just the luminance that is required. You do not, because they believe in a lot of light pollution, but as you get off the Bay Bridge, you come into Bay Area, you come to Berkeley come to Walnut Creek, and then Alamo, where I am. In Alamo, there's no lights on the street. It's because they believe that lighting is this pollution, and it's harmful for the birds, the flora and the fauna. They need to sleep, and that's why they do not have street lights. The lights are very dim, just the required on the junctions, and that's how it is over there. Whereas here we have real large fittings. Of course, now they've reduced from previously, we've got into LEDs, but still the lights are very hard. When you're driving, it hurts your eyes. As I was telling you last week when I was in Ahmedabad and we saw the Sindhu Bhavan Road, it was so well lit. Only the carriageway was there and the pedestrian walkway that had the lighting, and just the required amount of lighting. So we are getting there, and I think we will also be in the next coming years, we should be there.
I see that happening in different parts of Gujarat, where there seems to be a more evolved sense of design in all aspects, even the quality of the buildings, the finishing of the buildings, the craftsmanship. Though it's not like high prices like Bombay, but in terms of quality, they are like far superior, I think, and getting the right consultants on board, paying attention to landscape design as well, and now lighting also. Obviously, you definitely, what you experienced happened is because someone consciously did the job right. I don't think it happened by chance.
So it's the awareness that is coming, that's why it's getting right. If you see the waterfront in Ahmedabad, again, the drive that is there again, they've really done very good lighting. And Ahmedabad is, again, Surat, as I was saying, on the road, when you drive from Surat city, you're driving to the Bangdalla, where the beach is. There again, they've done the right kind of lighting. So India is evolving.
Sachi, in our discussions earlier, we were talking about how lighting in an urban scale can greatly influence the tourism potential of that city. And there are live examples that you were talking about. Can you throw some light on this, and how can you educate us in terms of improving our scene in terms of tourism through lighting?
Hi, yeah. So just to let you know, we have studios based out of New Delhi and London. That's where we had the first-hand experience of understanding this at a one-to-one level. The difference that we saw after the experiencing what we are experiencing in the Western world, that is the London studio, and back in Delhi. We thought that our country has so much potential. Like when I come back to Delhi from London, I see that there is a lot of potential, which is, like for example, the enhancement that the cultural heritage, the history that we have. Yes, we are highlighting the monuments, yes, we are highlighting the roads and the bridges, but not in the apt way. Like for example, like our dear friend really said, the Bay Bridge was a good example. It's just enough lighting for you to know that it's an architectural enhancement through the lighting, good enough for you to drive, not adding a glare to it, it's not a lighting pollution. Similar way, we have a Royal Albert Bridge in London. Everything else is pitch dark except for that bridge. It just transforms. It gives you a thought process. It's so inspiring. We have seen it in movies. A lot of Shah Rukh Khan movies, we saw that bridge. But why don't we have our own bridge here, the Yamuna Bridge, in that category? It has elements that could be highlighted. The other thing I think for tourism, which we have our neighboring countries, like for example Singapore, we have Dubai. Singapore has the first nocturnal nightlife safari that added long back, decades back. Dubai is a city where we are seeing, even in summers, it has an influx of lot of travelers. That's adding to the infrastructure to that city. It's going, we all are seeing it in our eyes for the last 10 years. It has reached from where to where. They are using the nocturnal tourism, which is the night tourism, and because the daytime is not apt for the tourism, but they are still encashing the nighttime by putting the lights and the water shows. You have the resorts, well-lit infrastructure, nightlife, clubs, all of those. We have ample space for that. We are lucky to have sunshine in the right temperature. But say, for example, again, a very vivid example, I would say, in London. London doesn't have light 6 months or maybe 8 months in a year. It's dark, it's dingy, it's depressing. How the government has utilized it by putting up the Christmas lights. We all know the Christmas light ceremonies that are happening there. It's such a renowned and a professional thing. It's so smart that just to uplift the motivation and the spirit of the people, it's an emotional boost. People would want to go out at night, add tourism to it. Daytime nobody steps out, it's too cold. Also their parks, for example, the Kew Gardens, it's dead. But the lighting, amazing work. The way they have done the landscape lighting, all the gimmicks that they have attached. The tickets are sold in advance for a year. You can't get a Kew Garden light show for this year. We have zoos in our country, we have infrastructure, or we need to just open to the ideas of adding to our infrastructure and adding more advantage that we are already having it.
I can see that, those few little spots of, interesting lighting shows or, special lighting installations, and how easily it's lapped up by the, hungry public is what I see in Bandra, in that before the ceiling, before the toll on that corner, that reclamation area, and they have a little patch, probably 2 acres of total land that they light up, and the entire city lands up there. It's a chaos because they're dying for,
It's a mood lifter.
It's such a drought in our environment. Now, here's one spot, and here in London, the entire city goes through that.
Even during lockdown, we were stuck there. They were putting out slogans and information to stay at home. It was all done via lighting because nobody was about to meet or greet, but they were all reading it through the decorations of the lighting. They were applauding NHS for their help and services. So there's so much of morale, there's so much out there we can spread as awareness with lighting, and it add to the tourism as well.
And we have so many festivals which are
absolutely
reason to
Diwali,
take advantage of.
We are known worldwide for Diwali.
Lights, so
why not? We should just moderate it and make it like the pomp and show that we all love to.
People from around the world, they visit London during Christmas time. In fact, they start the illumination 1 month before 25th December.
Yeah.
And I think their tourism numbers increase at that time.
The winter tourism has gone up.
And the roads get filled with people,
Absolutely. And people want to go out at night when the traffic is clean and they want to enjoy, experience the city, heritage, culture, everything.
What do you have to say?
Starts from Halloween. It starts from Halloween right up to
absolutely.
New Year. It goes over
It's my
New
son's
Year.
favorite. Yeah, I'm aware.
So I saw because of this G20 summit, I'm seeing some strange kind of lightings happening across the country, some very strange stuff, like what do you, I can't even
Celebrity lighting.
I can even see, like such large level of lighting, but it's all those, it looks like those, Rassi lights and those Diwali lights, those temporary things that you put up, but here they're doing stuff to a large scale. The first city I had seen this happening was in Calcutta, where they put up the colors of the ruling party there on all the street poles. Now I saw them influencing the rest of the country, and in the name of G20, they've had this kind of decoration with strange things. What's your opinion of what are you saying?
This is something, he gave me some figures which really shocked me, and we could do much more in good temporary lighting and with half the money spent. जो ये decoration पे लग रहा है, this is really too much.
And they also get busted. I can see a few poles off, and
it's a temporary, non-professionally done work. And I'd like to add...
it's been nearly a year now, or it's supposed to last a year.
I think they would be replacing it. It's very rewarding to replace them too.
Right.
as rewarding as installing them. We are taking it a little too far. Like we are being literally forced to light up the Charminar in RGB color. We tried our best. We lost to the minister. But,
Similarly, I was appalled to see, our own parliament in Delhi one day lit up with, violet and lilac and some really strange colors. What was that?
And you're not going to like what we're doing to the Bombay High Court, such a beautiful building. Kanchan's done a very beautiful job right next to the building, but we've been forced by the court to do RGB for the High Court. And it's so much so I was actually called for a contempt of court hearing because we'd not done RGB earlier. So when they saw the tender, किसी ने जाके बता दिया कि judges को ये RGB नहीं कर रहे हैं. How will you make the taranga there? So so I was issued a notice for contempt of court. That's also happening. But the good thing is that we will do something there. We'll still try our best to do that RGB as artistically as possible. But it's not going to be the same as the Rajabhai Tower. Those are the limitations. But having said that, there are some good people, powers that count, who understand aesthetics, who understand good work, and ultimately that's going to catch on.
Yes, I guess after seeing the Rajabhai Tower, she's considered a fantastic job, and it's way ahead, of the other stuff going on in the city. Now that alone should hopefully, educate, what can be done to the decision makers. Talking about those temporary installations happening across the country, like how do you control such things, and instead of having such high spends on these temporary things, in case they were to be made into more permanent fixtures, I guess with the similar effort and resources, you could come up with something that would last 10 years. Then this, why are we in this situation?
Interesting question.
And who are we impressing? Those G20 people who are coming from around the world?
I think
are they impressed?
It's pulling onto the same strings that that Sachi was talking about. I think it's about this feel-good factor that, we are here. And you have to make a statement that India's arrived because G20 is in India and that sort of a thing. So it has its role in its history as such. But from now on, the question is maybe it's G20 and we can excuse it. It's G20.
It's just not just Bombay, by the way.
Yeah, it's all over the country because G20 is happening everywhere and they're hosting it in multiple locations.
It's happening all over. And all on similar lines.
But I think there are three things that we could do to maybe control this in future. One is that we know that G20 sort of thing can happen to our cities, right? You can just get attacked by these LED lights and multicolor ones, RGB and whatnot. One thing is we can try and see if there can be some sort of awareness creation that this has an impact on all species. So one is the light pollution. But there is this whole thing that if you light a tree, if you put a light on a tree, the flowering tree or any other tree, the birds nesting on those trees go away. Because they follow a pattern, like all of us, they follow a pattern and there needs to be darkness for them to survive. And contrary to popular belief, cities are one of the hotbeds of biodiversity. So, for instance, in New York, it's fully built out, but massive amount of biodiversity in Central Park. San Francisco, the entire Bay Area has huge biodiversity. Mumbai has one of the richest biodiversities in the form of our mangroves and the hills, one of the most undulating cities in the country, with the hills that we have, and there are cheetahs and jaguars and whatnot. We have
forest
immense,
in the middle of the city.
Yes, one of
where
the
the leopards
luckiest
goes
city to
out
have
mauling
such a
people.
big forest within the city. We tend to sort of ignore these things, but there's a reason why we shouldn't be lighting our cities in that fashion. The reason is that it is not good for species. When species go down, actually a lot of other problems will increase. Our city will see increased flooding, our cities will see increase, because these species are all tied to a circle of life, which is
Right.
balancing our city. The trees don't thrive if the species are not there. And if the trees don't thrive, the water runoff would be a lot more. There's so many compounding effects that a small thing like this can disrupt our ecosystem in that fashion. So there's a very balanced sort of way nature has its own way of doing things. It will not affect the species. They will return when we are not there. So that's not the problem. The problem is that we have to learn how to live with nature. And when we start respecting that, when we create awareness that why shouldn't we do this, maybe the minister will think about this and say, you're right. Let's create awareness saying that you need to think about a city in a different manner. Let's institutionalize lighting as a plan for a city. You need to create an institutional framework that does our city have a lighting master plan? It's done for everywhere else. Dubai has it, Abu Dhabi has it. You have to submit plans saying that I'm going to light it in this lux level. Over here, I want extra permission to light this more because it's part of a square, which is very important, historically relevant, all of that. Once we institutionalize this, it will slowly and steadily come into our system. And then when the tenders go out, it can't be about that Rassi lights. It has to be part of the whole thought process, which it's great that the forum is starting to discuss lighting and cities. So this is the start, which...
So
I'd like to-
sorry. In San Francisco, when we're doing a project, we have to do a photo-luminous test, and you have to submit that to the city. So how much of light, you're going to have pollution by the lighting. That's very important. Like he mentioned about the birds and the trees, that is considered. And you've got to have the lighting in such a way that they don't hit the trees. Here we are doing, we light up the trees more than the other way around.
Those are our favorite elements to light up.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've got nothing else to light the trees.
I'd like to add what Sarfaraz said, and there's an impact of lighting on the flora and fauna. But we did the master plan of Shenzhen, and actually we supervised the execution of the entire master plan. The entire city's lighting was changed in 4 to 5 years. What we were able to do was that we were, with the right color of light and the right lighting design, I would say, we were able to light up the trees, beautify the spaces, and still get the flora and fauna back into the city. And the United Nations actually conducted a study on that, and I was lucky to go to the European Parliament and speak to a full house on how we did it. And so it's possible.
So can you throw some light and educate us on this?
One thing what we did was we were able to bring the lighting levels down to 40% everywhere, on the street lights, in the parks, in the landscape.
And the city was fine with the lower levels?
They'd never noticed it.
I would agree to that, because a similar survey and installation was done in Wales, in England. Nobody noticed. It was done by 40%, reduced by 40%. None.
So when we started stepping down the lighting of the street lights, everybody was a little, nobody wants to take chances. So we went down 10% at a time. And when we came down to 40%, there was virtually no impact on anything. Then suddenly the shop heads started looking brighter, so we started dimming those. The building lights started looking brighter, we started dimming those. So once you start an impact, because most of the nighttime lighting so far has been for the roads, for the streets. We light up for cars, we don't light up for human beings. So they're already done. So there's a benchmark in every city. You have these brightly lit roads already there. So if you start reducing them and using that energy somewhere else, the whole nightscape changes. So with 24-hour cities, we're working for a project in China, which is research on 24-hour cities. It's all about darkness, not about illumination. It's more about darkness, keeping the city functional with minimum, minimum lighting levels. But in India, somehow we've developed this gluttony for light. We want more and more light. We have one of the most lit roads in the world, and they're heavily lit, too brightly lit, I should say.
Yeah, like if you, now an important road like Marine Drive, you drive on that, I think people can do their homework and read textbooks under that light. You know, and as you drive, you look up, you know, it's sort of the glare is so much, it's disturbing. Now, when you are, you know, compare this with cities with similar scenario, for example, Miami's Ocean Drive, then Chicago's Lakeshore Drive, or some Corniche in one of those Middle Eastern cities. What's the difference between what we guys are doing and those more evolved markets?
We are not doing it too scientifically. Most of the road lighting, unfortunately, is not being designed by qualified, I would say, lighting designers or consultants who know the business and what should be the minimum levels. The norms have been fixed for probably the manufacturers more than the than the public or what is required.
I can see Marine Drive becoming lighter, brighter by the year. Because I grew up in Bombay, so I remember during the olden days of sodium vapor lamps and it upgrading to these bright LED, super bright lights, and also the size of the height of these masts. I mean, they're so high. I pity those guys who live on Marine Drive. I guess they do never have a nighttime experience. For them, it's 24 hours illumination.
It's not healthy. There's so much science about sleeping in illuminated rooms. You don't get the adequate rest. It has an impact on your sugar levels and the blood pressure levels too. So overlighting is not healthy. I mean, at all. But we are really not bothered at the moment. I shared with you this example of Srinagar, one of the worst lit cities in the world. The roads are absolutely dark. They have these top high mast lights in the name of security. And they light
up the top of the buildings.
Top of the buildings. They throw light in the in the rooms through the windows. But the roads are dark. You can't walk on those roads. You need a torch. I mean, पुराने ज़माने में हम भी torch use करते थे. But remember, I mean, just imagine you need to use a torch.
So how did you clean up the act there?
It's sad, but we've done part of the area now. Srinagar's work in progress. So some of the areas we've actually shown to the government that you really don't need those high mast lights. We first switched them off. Now they're removing them, relocating them to other areas. But that's what's happening. And we're talking of biodiversity. Srinagar has wonderful biodiversity, but I think we're learning. So
in the, the dharm sankat sometimes I get into, right, is in the name of lighting design, making it look cool, glamorous, blah, blah, blah. Where does the green element or this whole sustainability angle come into all this? A bit of a fix sometimes between making, like say when we're doing resorts, hotels, we are in a fix because the clients expect us to light up the landscape and light up the trees in a certain way, and they will not accept this minimalist lighting and darkness for the plants and the life around. So how do we balance this out?
There is a lot of science available of how to light up, say, landscapes without harming the flora and fauna. Like you mentioned about the plants need rest, so do the insects and the life. Everybody needs rest. So if there's a way of doing it, you can fix up, I mean, you could do a cycle, you light up the space for a few hours, then give it absolute darkness. Like the quantity of light, if you have less quantity of light, you can expose a plant and an animal to a longer period. But if you are exposing it to a high quantity of light, then you would need to reduce the reduce the number of hours you're exposing that particular thing to. So there's a lot of science available for.
What about the energy angle? Energy consumption.
Actually, now energy for lighting.
So these lights right now, because of the new technology, are they consuming far lesser amount of quantum of energy?
Yeah, only 10% of what we used to do during the incandescent and fluorescent times, because the precision is more. You can control the light. You're wasting less light. The light sources are much more efficient. So now, I think energy consumption is not too much of an issue. Okay. The issue is the quality of light. So we need to shift from quantity, energy. Now sustainability is shifting towards quality of light, what we should be giving to people. Because light is actually causing a lot of damage too. So more lighting does.
I sort of have another cheat sheet that we use in our practice. We do large landscape projects in which a developer or someone says that कुछ किया है ऐसा दिखना चाहिए, है ना? ऐसा खर्चा किया है भाई. In that case, what we do is, there's a very nice little clause in Griha. If you want to get Griha rating in a township level, they say that you cannot uplight a tree, or you can't sort of uplight any tree. So we have a cheat sheet. What we do is we sort of plant these. So there are two types of species. We plant heavily with native species in our landscapes, and we don't uplight them. But there are all along the pathway where there is, you have these decorative trees that will never have a bird's nest in them. There are few. You know when you see them that these are, almost plastic-like species, but they are real trees. But birds don't prefer to nest on them. We use those as dummies to see at least we can contain the enclosure where the light is and leave the behind part, which is more to do with biodiversity, it's more to do with life and ecosystem, and leave that untouched. That has helped us to some extent in reducing this, but at the same time, I absolutely understand there are so many pressures that you have to deal with till you get a mature client, and that day will come. We are moving there slowly and steadily, but till then we have to come up with innovative sort of solutions to counter this.
We are now, like Mr. Basur and myself and another third friend of ours, we're in a bit of a, again, situation in Delhi where the people, the environmental people, they are so excessively oversensitive about this. Now it's on that Nelson Mandela mark. I thought I was doing a really great job of putting up, these those large date palm trees or phoenix and wanting to light up, like a fashion avenue because got all these cool malls and stuff. And then suddenly, and there's a big forest at the back, So those guys said, like you planting this, firstly it's an alien species. Okay, you have tree. I said, I just step out, I go to Rajasthan, I see all these big date palms and phoenix palms growing in the wild. Like, okay, I don't see it within Delhi, but it's just like a few kilometers away, you do see it. That was one problem. Then in order to illuminate these trees inspired by, stuff you see in Las Vegas or lit up, we try to do that kind of stuff. And then they said that अपना था ऊपर का जो घोंसला बनेगा पक्षियों का उन लोग तो इधर नहीं बनेगा, उधर सोने के लिए नहीं आएगा. ऐसे उधर thousands of acres है, उधर जाके घोंसला बनाए. मेरे पेड़ पे क्यों आ रहा है? और and so these guys they totally butchered the project.
Because I think
given a chance.
So in a situation like this, when you
given
have
a chance, you
overzealous
should,
people,
given a
just-
chance, you should always plant native trees.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Always.
yes. Because there is not enough. And I see the other side as well. I do understand what you're saying, but there are some species that are, there's a lot of gradation of species. So one is absolutely no-no, which is this invasive species, which has a problem that once an invasive species comes, it destroys the forest behind. Because it multiplies at a phenomenal growth rate, which the other forests can't keep up. They actually start.
so the seeds from that will probably go and
Those are invasive species. They actually create huge problems for ecosystems that are around you. So absolute no-no list is there, which you must probably absolutely never plant. Then there are these acceptable docile trees that are okay to survive with the others and are not expanding their territory to a large extent. So you should be aware of which one is this that is acceptable, docile, will look pretty, but will not have. So there are a lot of gradations.
This thing was more about lighting. The fact that we were lighting these trees up. So those guys were freaking out at the thought of, some birds not being able to rest. It's just one road,
No, but that road could create a massive avalanche of other things that the forest would get impacted in a city system. So what you put in this...
So that was valid.
is very
There,
absolutely valid.
So
A lot of these trees also take away the groundwater from the other trees. So that actually is harmful. So that's the reason.
So we did preserve all those kika trees in the central median, but these barren places on the sides, in order to create some instantaneous landscape, we got in some big trees.
So with Dubai, there's a big problem of them planting palms which are not there. It's
so
not
what is
native.
what all other...
Dubai does not support palm trees. Palm trees happen only at the oasis. It takes the immense amount of water, and Dubai doesn't have water. They desalinate it, which contributes to the energy sort of. So it's this cycle that they've gotten into. They've gotten into liked palm trees, and it's become the identity of Dubai, which is never the identity of Dubai. So that problem, we should leapfrog. That's my suggestion, that we should learn from cities and the mistakes that people have made and not repeat them over here. A lot of people like slim trees along streets so that they can create this avenue. Maybe it is time we think about streets very differently, with maybe big canopies being our identity as Indian streets.
Like our race course.
Exactly.
Wellington Club is fabulous. What those guys did, having those big rain trees,
So again,
unlike.
so a whole different session on species and trees, especially.
Yeah.
But lighting is one of those things that we probably have some innovative ways in which we can light trees for temporarily, and eventually we'll not be lighting trees. That's the aim, goal, or vision, maybe, that lighting would be looked at differently.
Again, there are ways of lighting up trees. I had a wonderful experience with the regulators once. So we were lighting up these monuments from a distance. So what we are targeting is about 20 lakhs. And we got a letter from these regulators कि ये UV से हमारा stone खराब हो जाएगा. तो मैंने कहा that 1 lakh lux of sun doesn't spoil it. ये मेरा 20 lakhs का करेगा. So I mean, that's how far the regulators can go. But there are ways of lighting up trees. We can have a whole lot of this. Probably next FOAID have a discussion of how to light up trees without, damaging the ecosystem.
But then we do have lights with high thermals, to navigate trees, you know what I mean? Like internal courtyards and stuff where the sunshine is not there. We have lighting of high thermal efficiencies to inculcate greens as well. But I think one point I'd like to add about the G20, I think the country is, graduating to another level. It's developing like none other. It's right there in the world map. I think the lighting somehow in the country, though it's a light pollution, but it proves the sentiments that we have arrived. It's like flood lighting everywhere. It's like out there. And people are in some way just being represented by the spirits, So maybe that's the positive point about it.
So it's a starting point,
It's
and maybe
just a
we'll
starting
graduate
point.
someday.
Yeah.
So let's call it a day for this talk. I hope it was enlightening, talking about lighting. and having such nice people here to talk about and people with so much experience. You must go see what he has done with the Gwalior Fort, and it's completely transformed and it looks absolutely beautiful. So compliments to you on that.
Thank you so much.
And I hope you can do many such projects in the country and make us proud.
Yeah, it's good to see, new lighting designers coming in, because earlier we never had lighting designers. With whichever fitting was the cheapest, the client would say, put this one. Now they have educated the clients, they've educated us also in many ways, and we're looking forward to
So this is just the
better,
beginning,
yeah.
so a long way to go, but
I'd
it's a
like
great
to thank
start.
you all on behalf of all the lighting design community.
Thank you.